I have pointed out to a couple of people that Donald Trump's track record isn't especially religious, and there are other candidates in the field who are perhaps who wear God on their sleeve a bit more visibly, but they weren't having any of that. God loves Trump and Trump loves God, people were telling me. So their minds were made up.
As the Sunday Times Washington correspondent Alistair Dawber reports in today's paper, the former president does have seemingly a firm grip on support in the Bible Belt of the US. Alistair Dawber has been in South Carolina speaking to voters.
Any Republican will be a very strong candidate in that part of South Carolina. But I think Trump brings his own sort of stardust to the area. I mean, the Pickens is a town of about 3,000 people. It's very difficult to estimate how many people were at the rally yesterday, but I mean, I think you're looking at probably somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people. So he's got a big pull. It's a town that had industry that doesn't have so much industry anymore. It's in the Bible Belt, and it listens to what Donald Trump has to say, and it likes what it hears. He promises jobs. He promises strong reliance on the church. And a backlash against central government or the federal government in Washington.
I'm struck by the Bible Belt fact and the idea that there is Christian support for him, certainly in parts across the country, of course, but focusing here. And I just wonder what you picked up in that sense, because one could point to Trump's behaviour as being not particularly Christian. Whether it's being indicted, whether it's federal charges, whether it's confusion and suggestions about paying money to a porn star, having affairs. There are any number of things that are not particularly Christian attributes about this man.
Right, exactly that, and that's an absolutely valid point to make. I mean, Donald Trump is accused of all sorts of crimes. He's accused of paying hush money to a porn star, as you said, to conceal their affair. He was found civilly liable in a court a couple of months ago for having sexually assaulted a writer, and was ordered to pay her $5 million in damages. The people around the area I was in yesterday, Pickens, they see it as part of a conspiracy against him. They see it as an easy way of getting at him, and they see it as a way of the federal government, the deep state as they call it, preventing him coming back into office. I have pointed out to a couple of people that Donald Trump's track record isn't especially religious, and there are other candidates in the field who are perhaps who wear God on their sleeve a bit more visibly, but they weren't having any of that. God loves Trump and Trump loves God, people were telling me. So their minds were made up.
Wow. I suppose viewing his messaging from a distance, it's almost easy to be critical of it because we're maybe zoomed out. We understand what he's saying against in the context of the fact, and those two things are often at loggerheads. But it's interesting that in a community like this, that just doesn't cut through at all. It's Trump's message that wins.
Well, Trump paints himself as the underdog. He suggests that all these criminal cases, and the rally yesterday was the first big rally he's held since he appeared in a federal court in Miami, charged with breaches of the Espionage Act for holding classified documents after he left office. He paints himself as the underdog. This is to his mind, and his message is that this is the state, the federal government, the Biden crime family, as he now calls them, trying to prevent him getting back into office. And people, I think, in places like Pickens see themselves as the underdog as well. I mean, they're very much sort of advocates of pro-life. They're anti-abortionists, and they see attacks on things like that as similar attacks by the federal government. And so Donald Trump can sort of slip into the slipstream of some of these arguments and paint himself as a very attractive candidate to some of these people.
How would people react to you, Alistair, when you pointed out the facts and the reality? How did they sort of respond to you? Were you part of the conspiracy in their eyes?
They don't trust the media generally. I think the foreign media gets a little bit of an easier ride because we're a bit more novel, and not many reporters from the Sunday Times turn up in Pickens. But so there's a novelty value, and people are unfailingly polite. I have to say that whenever I've been to one of these sort of southern rural places that are very strongly supportive of Donald Trump, everyone's incredibly polite, incredibly accommodating, incredibly welcoming, but they leave you in no doubt that they they don't like your line of questioning, and they disagree with the tenor of what you're trying to say.
And how is he viewed sort of by the sort of Republican establishment, I suppose, in these sorts of areas? Because I noted that you spoke to a former executive director of the South Carolina Republican Party, and this is Alex Stroman, and he perhaps is not a big Trump fan. So I'm just wondering about how the party views him in these sorts of areas.
Well, there's two ways of looking at that. There are the people that will vote in the primaries next year to select the nominee for the White House, and Trump is miles ahead. I mean, we've written a lot about and discussed on the radio a lot about Ron DeSantis, the governor, the Florida governor, as a challenger. Mike Pence, Trump's former vice president. All these guys who are in the mix, they don't come anywhere close to Trump in terms of the polls. Trump's about anywhere between 50 and 60% of polls with 10 or 11 candidates. But there are people like Alex Stroman, who you mentioned just then. He's a former leading light in the Republican Party in South Carolina. He's, I think, waiting for Trump to slip up. I think he's waiting for perhaps Trump to be convicted in one of these cases, and hoping very much that the sort of the scales fall from people's eyes. But really, the evidence, I think, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Trump will be able to persuade enough people in the Republican Party that, whatever happens to him is this conspiracy orchestrated in Washington. And I think it would now be quite a big shock if Donald Trump didn't win the Republican nomination next year.
And just as a final thought, Alistair, as you leave somewhere like Pickens and you have experienced, as you say, a warm welcome, arguably perhaps a sort of Christian welcome, people being pleasant, being kind, looking out for each other, that sort of hospitality and that sort of community, and you identify that other candidates are perhaps more evidently Christian in a community like that. How do you reflect on this compared to the Donald Trump of the past and the reception that he would get of the past? Is this very similar? Is it a similar kind of outworking of Christian support for him, or does it feel different in any way?
I think it feels similar. I think in places like Pickens, he has convinced the majority of people that he represents what they want. Not only in terms of their Christian values, but that certainly comes into it, but also in terms of standing up against China, standing up against the Democratic Party, standing up against those that would perhaps sort of take away their guns or reintroduce abortion, that sort of thing. So I think he ticks as many boxes, to use that awful cliche, as these people want. I don't think that his popularity is slipping in any way. In fact, I think it's probably getting stronger. And for all the things that they see at the top of their list of important attributes a candidate should have, or policies that a candidate should have, he fits the bill in almost every case.
Thank you so much for watching. You get extra points for making it all the way to the end of the video.
And if you want to see more from me, Chloe and Callum, you can join us every Friday to Sunday on Times Radio from 6 a.m.